Welcome, esteemed viewers, to a magnificent journey through time. Today, we witness the fall of giants. Many believe a massive global alliance finally vanquished the mighty Mongol war machine. But history reveals a much darker and fascinating truth. No foreign army brought their ruin. Instead, the supreme conquerors were quietly consumed by the crushing weight of endless borders. How did the greatest empire dissolve into the captured cultures? Let us uncover this collapse. By the late 13th century, the sprawling Mongol dominion spanned from the Pacific to Europe. No single nation on Earth could stand against the terrifying thunder of their advancing horsemen. They had forged the most massive, continuous land empire that humanity had ever recorded. Yet the year 1294 marked a devastating turning point, with the passing of Kublai Khan. The great ruler took his last breath on a luxurious bed, leaving a fragmented legacy. His departure ignited a quiet but devastating war, fought not with swords, but against sheer distance. Elite warriors stood frozen before magnificent maps, realizing their arrows could not cross continents. The breathtaking scale of their conquered lands transformed from a glorious prize into a burden. According to ancient chronicles, the central authority slowly began to fracture beyond repair. Without a single unifying leader, the legendary bloodline of Genghis Khan began to divide. The immense shadow of the Khagan faded, replaced by the bitter reality of distant lands. Vast distance became the ultimate enemy, dividing brothers across the massive Asian steppe. To maintain control, they relied heavily on the legendary Yam system, a vast network of horsemen. But even the swiftest riders could not outrun the expanding cracks of a fractured political realm. Imperial decrees written on magnificent parchments took entire months to reach the distant borders. By the time commands arrived, the local political landscape had often completely shifted. This massive delay crippled their ability to respond to uprisings or natural disasters. Governors in distant provinces began forging their own laws, ignoring the distant central command. The invincible Mongol cavalry found themselves paralyzed by the silence of delayed communications. A profound realization hit the empire. You cannot effectively rule what you cannot quickly reach. The unified map of the Mongol dominion slowly fractured along geographic and cultural lines. The Great Steppes, once the magnificent highway to victory, now acted as an ocean of isolation. It was the first devastating blow to their unity, proving that geography defeats grand armies. Many historians argue the Mongol dominion was simply too huge to exist in the medieval world. Their sweeping ambition outpaced their technology, leaving them stranded across an endless continent. The formidable warriors who conquered the world could not conquer the vast emptiness between their cities. The glorious golden age of Pax Mongolica began to crumble under its own geographic weight. As the central power severely weakened, the four major khanates drifted into hostile, separate realms. The Yuan dynasty, the Golden Horde, the Ilkhanate, and the Chagatai Khanate became bitter rivals. The unified brotherhood of the steppe perished, replaced by a devastating struggle for survival. Moving into the 14th century, the empire faced its second formidable opponent, the economy. The legendary Silk Road had brought unimaginable wealth, but it also sowed the seeds of division. Wealth flowing from global trade routes quickly became the primary obsession of the regional rulers. The United Khanates began fighting fiercely over taxation rights and lucrative trade monopolies. Instead of sharing resources, brother turned against brother to control the flow of precious eastern silk. Massive stone border checkpoints were erected between territories that once shared a single grand banner. Corrupt tax collectors exploited diverse merchants, strangling the legendary trade that made them rich. Regional lords sat behind heavy wooden desks, greedily counting gold coins while their local people starved. The economy shifted from a united treasury to isolated, competing regional wealth funds. Trade conflicts erupted, proving far more devastating than physical battles fought on the open plains. The Golden Horde blocked vital trade routes to the Ilkhanate, causing massive economic starvation. In retaliation, the Ilkhanate formed alliances with foreign powers to bypass their Mongol cousins. The blood of Genghis was no longer enough to maintain peace when towering mountains of gold were involved. Financial greed replaced the warrior code, transforming proud warlords into calculating merchants. The unified currency system collapsed entirely, replaced by local coins that divided the regions. Inflation and economic instability swept across the empire, weakening their formidable strength. The staggering cost of maintaining massive armies became impossible without global commerce. The magnificent wealth that built their glorious cities was now slowly tearing their foundation apart. Meanwhile, the geographic struggle continued to drain the vital essence of the exhausted Yam messengers. Imagine being a rider, collapsing in a harsh desert storm, clutching a meaningless royal decree. The unforgiving environment of the Eurasian steppe showed no mercy to the struggling imperial web. If you led such an empire, would you divide the wealth or force total central domination? This monumental dilemma broke the Mongol leaders, leading to a permanent fracture of their vision. As communication failed and trade conflicts escalated, the isolated Khanates looked inward for strength. They began to rely heavily on the local populations they had vanquished to maintain their economies. This profound reliance on local bureaucrats and administrators opened the door for their ultimate fall. Historical records show that the Mongols were outnumbered by their subjects by a staggering margin. To govern effectively, they had to adopt the administrative practices of the conquered nations. The conquerors started learning the languages of the very people they had completely subdued. It was a necessary strategy for economic survival, but it planted the seeds of cultural decline. The pure nomadic identity of the steppe warrior began to blur and quietly fade into the background. The howling winds of the Mongolian plains were forgotten, replaced by the comforts of majestic cities. A profound transformation was taking place, one that formidable swords and arrows could never stop. The Grand Empire was no longer one entity, but four distinct nations, evolving in different ways. The physical separation created by geography had now become a deep, irreversible cultural gap. The Golden Horde in Eastern Europe faced brutal winters and the influence of local Slavic tribes. The Ilkhanate in Persia was surrounded by ancient Islamic traditions and breathtaking artistry.
Guide us on the straight path.
The Yuan dynasty in China was absorbed by the massive gravity of traditional Chinese culture. The Chagatai Khanate struggled to keep the old ways amidst rising Islamic regional influence. Each majestic Khanate fought its own unique battle against the subtle, overwhelming force of assimilation. The proud descendants of Genghis Khan were becoming strangers to each other, speaking different tongues. The unified Mongol identity was erased, replaced by the diverse cultures of conquered empires. Geography divided their bodies, economy divided their loyalty, and culture divided their souls. The monumental engine of conquest finally stalled, paralyzed by its own massive global success. As decades passed, the cracks in the empire widened into massive, unbridgeable cultural canyons. The Mongol rulers realized that ruling the world required them to become a vibrant part of the world. This brings us to the final, devastating blow that completely wiped the Mongol Empire from the global map. It was not a military defeat, nor a sudden uprising that ended their long and formidable reign. The final knockout punch was delivered quietly, over generations, within the walls of their own grand courts. The wild conquerors of the steppe were about to be entirely consumed by their own massive victory. By the mid-14th century, the assimilation of the Mongol elite was almost entirely complete. The supreme irony of history unfolded. Victorious invaders surrendered to the defeated realms. Let us examine the Yuan dynasty, where the Mongol emperors ruled over the vast and ancient lands of China. The Yuan Emperor sat imposingly on a dragon throne, wearing opulent silk imperial garments. The fierce nomadic warrior had completely vanished, replaced by a traditional Chinese royal figure. He practiced Confucian rituals, spoke fluent Chinese, and managed a complex bureaucratic system. The wild energy of the steppe was traded for the highly structured life of the majestic imperial court. Thousands of miles away, a similar transformation conquered the powerful rulers of the Grand Ilkhanate. The Ilkhanate ruler discarded the ancient shamanistic beliefs of his fierce nomadic ancestors. Instead, he stood in serene prayer within stunning mosques, fully embracing the profound Islamic faith. Wearing a luxurious Persian velvet kaftan and a silk turban, he became a devout Muslim leader. The fierce conquerors of Baghdad transformed into the greatest patrons of Persian art and brilliant science. They built massive observatories and grand libraries, leaving their fierce nomadic history behind. The Mongol bloodline remained, but the soul and mind had become entirely Persian and profoundly Islamic. The Golden Horde in Eastern Europe evolved into a formidable blend of Turkic and Slavic traits. The fierce Golden Horde Khan stood aggressively amidst a freezing and overwhelmingly furious storm. Wearing heavy European chainmail and sable fur, he looked exactly like a northern warlord. His people mixed with the local Turkic tribes, creating a completely new and vibrant hybrid culture. The traditional Mongolian language was slowly forgotten, replaced by a dominant Turkic dialect. Even their physical features changed dramatically through generations of intermarriage with the locals.
We will thrive here.
The proud descendants of the Golden family now possessed pale skin and striking, piercing blue eyes. Across the massive continent, the legendary bloodline of the steppe was heavily diluted and forever lost. They were no longer the unified, unstoppable force that had previously dominated the entire world. Assimilation was the silent vanquisher that completely dismantled their original identity. The supreme irony is that they conquered the world, only to be gracefully conquered by its cultures. By trying to rule every civilization, they surrendered their own uniquely powerful, nomadic soul. The mighty bows and arrows of their ancestors were replaced by ancient books and local traditions. This cultural surrender proved far more devastating than any tragic defeat upon the battlefield. The massive empire fractured into pieces that no longer recognized their common historical origin. The Yuan dynasty eventually fell to the Ming uprising, pushed back into the barren, windswept steppe. The Ilkhanate collapsed into smaller, warring Persian states after decades of devastating internal strife. The Golden Horde slowly broke apart, eventually subdued by the rising, formidable power of Russia. The Chagatai Khanate splintered and vanished into the incredibly complex politics of Central Asia. Every single fragment of the great Mongol machine was quietly dismantled by time and geography. The once terrifying conquerors simply melted away into the massive populations they had proudly ruled. No massive explosion marked the end of their glorious reign, only a quiet and inevitable fade. Their grand legacy is not found in the ruined walls of ancient cities they had devastatingly subdued. Instead, their true and lasting impact lies in the profound ways they reshaped the Eurasian continent. By connecting East and West, they inadvertently sparked a massive and unprecedented global trade network. The ancient Silk Road flourished beautifully under their brief but incredibly powerful global protection. Gunpowder, paper money, and vital technologies traveled freely across the newly connected lands. This massive exchange of brilliant ideas laid the essential groundwork for the modern, globalized world. They forced vastly different civilizations to interact, trade, and ultimately understand each other deeply. The formidable conquest gave birth to an unprecedented era of rich and vibrant cultural integration. They erased ancient borders, creating a new reality where distant nations were finally securely linked. Today, countless people across Eurasia carry the distinct genetic markers of the great conquerors. The blood of Genghis Khan flows quietly within the veins of millions of modern, everyday citizens. New generations walk confidently along the ancient cobblestone paths of the magnificent ruined empire. They carry the beautifully blended heritage of a time when the entire world was united by horsemen. The formidable warriors of the steppe are gone, leaving behind a beautifully and richly mixed world. Their story is a powerful reminder that military strength cannot defeat the endless flow of time. Even the most dominant empires will eventually fall if they cannot adapt to their own massive size. Geography, economy, and culture will always outlast the sharpest swords and swiftest, strongest horses. The vastness of the earth is simply too incredibly great for any single ruler to hold forever. The Mongols learned this profound lesson the hard way, paying for their ambition with their identity. We must look beyond the legends of terror and clearly recognize their complex historical impact. They were formidable conquerors, yet they were also the massive, brilliant architects of global trade. They brought ancient cities to ruin, but they also built enduring bridges between isolated continents. The majestic golden hour sunset casts long, deep shadows over the beautifully forgotten imperial ruins. These ancient stones whisper the epic tale of an empire that died by becoming the world itself. The wind howling across the empty plains is the only voice left of the mighty and legendary Khagans. Their spectacular rise and quiet fall remain a profound and captivating masterpiece of human history. The Mongols did not fall in a fiery and tragic war. They dissolved, forever changing our modern world. Was their assimilation a tragic defeat, or a brilliant evolution? Share your profound thoughts below. If you enjoyed this deep historical dive, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more epic tales.